She will never be chosen, not like her sisters, until the most coveted duke unexpectedly asked for her hand. Lady Margaret Thornton had heard those words her entire life. With 4 beautiful, accomplished older sisters, Margaret was the family afterthought. Too bookish, too plain, too serious. Her mother had long given up on finding her a suitable match. But when the Duke of Ravencross returned from war, scarred and searching for a wife of substance rather than beauty, he shocked London society by requesting Margaret's hand. Her sisters were furious. Her mother was baffled, and Margaret herself could not understand why the most sought-after man in England would choose her, until she discovered his devastating secret, and everything she thought she knew about love, duty, and her own worth shattered completely. If stories like this move you, please subscribe to Velvet Tales. Every subscription helps us share more extraordinary tales of survival, second chances, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. Your support means these incredible true stories reach hearts that need them most. Lady Margaret Thornton stood in the corner of the Ashford ballroom, watching her 4 older sisters dance with London's most eligible gentlemen. At 24, Margaret had attended 6 London seasons, received exactly 3 proposals, all from aging widowers seeking a governess for their children rather than a wife, and had long accepted her fate as the family spinster. Her sisters were legendary. Arabella, the eldest at 29, had married a marquis. Dorothea, 27, was a countess. Cecilia, 26, had become a viscountess. Even Louisa, just 25, had secured an earl within her 2nd season. And then there was Margaret. Plain Margaret. Serious Margaret. Margaret who preferred books to balls, philosophy to fashion, substance to superficiality. She will never be chosen. Not like her sisters. Margaret's mother, the Countess of Thornton, had told the family butler just that morning, not realizing Margaret was in the adjacent room. 4 brilliant matches and then Margaret. I had hoped at least one daughter would take after her father's intellectual side, but did it have to come with such unfortunate looks? Those glasses, that brown hair, that complete lack of grace. I have given up. She will stay with us, manage the household, care for me in my old age. Some women are simply not meant for marriage. Margaret had heard variations of this sentiment her entire life. She had learned not to flinch, not to cry, not to reveal how deeply the words cut. Instead, she had built a life around books, managing her father's extensive library, corresponding with scholars, educating herself far beyond what was considered appropriate for women. If she could not have beauty, accomplishment, or marriage, she would have knowledge. That was something no one could take from her. Tonight the ballroom buzzed with unusual excitement. The Duke of Ravencross had returned from the war, 6 years fighting in various campaigns, returning a hero, now seeking a wife to secure his line and produce heirs. Every unmarried woman in London had set her sights on him. The Duke was 32, wealthy beyond measure, with estates spanning 3 counties. More importantly, he was rumored to have returned changed, scarred, serious, uninterested in the frivolous pursuits that occupied most of the aristocracy. Margaret had no illusions about catching his attention. Men like the Duke of Ravencross chose women like her sisters, beautiful, charming, accomplished in all the feminine arts. They did not choose women who wore spectacles, who debated philosophy with their father's friends, who preferred Latin texts to watercolor painting. She was about to slip away to the library. The Ashford family had a remarkable collection of first editions when the room went suddenly quiet. The Duke had arrived. He stood at the top of the stairs, surveying the ballroom with cold assessment. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet 3 inches, with dark hair and darker eyes. A scar ran from his left temple down his cheek, evidence of whatever horrors he had witnessed at war. He wore formal black, no decoration except his family signet ring. He looked dangerous, haunted, nothing like the charming nobleman who usually courted debutantes. Every mother in the room pushed their daughters forward. The Duke's gaze swept over them with visible disinterest. Beautiful faces, elaborate gowns, practiced curtsies. None of it seemed to move him. Then his eyes found Margaret. She was still in her corner, half hidden behind a potted palm, holding a small book she had smuggled into the ball. She looked up, met his gaze, and felt something electric pass between them. Recognition. Not of each other specifically, but of something familiar. Isolation. The experience of being surrounded by people but fundamentally alone. The Duke descended the stairs, and instead of approaching the cluster of eager debutantes, He walked directly toward Margaret. Margaret's heart hammered as he approached. She should curtsy, should say something witty and charming. Instead, she stood frozen, clutching her book like a shield. The Duke stopped directly in front of her, bowed slightly. Lady Margaret Thornton. He knew her name. How did he know her name? Your Grace, Margaret managed, executing an awkward curtsy that nearly caused her to drop her book. What are you reading? His voice was deep, roughened by years of shouting commands on battlefields. Margaret looked down at the slim volume in her hands. Marcus Aurelius. Meditations. The original Greek text. Something shifted in the Duke's expression, the slightest softening around his eyes. You read ancient Greek? Yes, and Latin. My father encouraged intellectual pursuits. He believed women were as capable of scholarship as men. She paused. That is an unfashionable opinion, I know. Not to me. I find intellectual women far more interesting than those who can only discuss the weather and the latest fashions. He gestured to the book. What is your favorite passage? Margaret, surprised by his genuine interest, quoted from memory, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. You apply that philosophy to your life? I must. I have no control over how society views me, but I can control how I respond. That is enough. The Duke studied her with unsettling intensity. You are aware that every person in this ballroom is staring at us? Yes. They are wondering why the most sought-after Duke in England is wasting time speaking to the plain Thornton daughter when 4 beautiful sisters are available. Is that how you see yourself? The plain daughter? Margaret met his eyes. That is how everyone sees me, Your Grace. I stopped pretending otherwise years ago. Then everyone is blind. He extended his hand. Would you honor me with a dance? Margaret stared at his outstretched hand, certain she had misheard. Your Grace, I am not accomplished at dancing. I will embarrass you. I doubt that. I am not accomplished at dancing either. War injuries have left me somewhat stiff. We will embarrass each other equally. Margaret took his hand, felt the calluses from years of sword work, and allowed him to lead her to the center of the ballroom. The crowd parted, whispers rippling through the assembled guests. The Duke of Ravencross was dancing with Margaret Thornton, not with Louisa, the youngest and most beautiful sister still unwed, not with any of the season's diamonds, with Margaret. The waltz began. The Duke held her properly but not intimately, maintaining appropriate distance. His movements were precise but slightly stilted, evidence of injuries that had not fully healed. You were truthful about your dancing, Margaret observed. I am always truthful. I find it exhausting to maintain polite fictions. He guided her through a turn. You are also truthful. That is rare in society. Truthfulness is easy when you have nothing to lose. Beautiful women must navigate complex social games. I have been freed from those expectations. Freed or excluded? The question cut deeper than Margaret expected. Both, freedom and exclusion, often look the same from different angles. They completed the dance in silence. When the music ended, the Duke bowed, Margaret curtsied. She expected him to move on to dance with someone more appropriate. Instead, he said, I would like to call on you tomorrow. With your parents' permission, of course. Would 2 o'clock be acceptable? Margaret's mind went blank. Call on me, specifically me? Yes. You are the most interesting person I have encountered since returning to London. I would like to continue our conversation. But my sisters. Louisa is beautiful, accomplished, perfect in every way. Surely you would prefer... I would prefer you. His tone left no room for argument. 2 o'clock, Lady Margaret. I will see you tomorrow. He walked away, leaving Margaret standing alone on the dance floor, surrounded by hundreds of eyes filled with shock, jealousy, and confusion. Her mother materialized beside her within seconds. Margaret, what did you say to him? What happened? The Duke of Ravencross wishes to call on you. This makes no sense. Are you certain you heard him correctly? He was quite clear, Mother. But why? Why would he choose you over Louisa? Louisa is everything a man could want. Beautiful, charming, accomplished. You are plain, bookish, unmarriageable. Yes, Mother, I am aware. Perhaps the Duke values different qualities. Her mother looked genuinely baffled. What qualities could you possibly possess that would interest a Duke? The words stung, even though Margaret had heard variations her entire life. I read ancient Greek, Mother. Perhaps he finds that appealing. Her mother made a dismissive sound. Men do not marry women for reading Greek. There must be some other explanation. Perhaps he pities you. Perhaps this is a cruel joke. Margaret, you must be prepared for disappointment. Do not build hopes on one dance. But Margaret's sister Louisa was less concerned with protecting Margaret's feelings and more concerned with her own wounded pride. She cornered Margaret in the ladies' retiring room an hour later. "What did you do?" Louisa demanded. "What did you say to make the Duke interested in you?" "I spoke honestly. About philosophy, he seemed to appreciate it." "Philosophy?" "Margaret, men do not want to discuss philosophy with potential wives. They want charm, beauty, grace, things you do not possess." Louisa's voice was sharp with frustration. "I have spent 5 years perfecting every accomplishment. I am the season's diamond. The Duke should have chosen me. Perhaps he does not want a diamond. Perhaps he wants something different. There is nothing different about you except that you are odd and unmarriageable. If the Duke truly shows interest tomorrow, it is because he is damaged from the war. No sound-minded man would choose you over me." Margaret absorbed the cruelty with practiced detachment. Her sisters had always been beautiful and accomplished. Margaret's existence had never threatened them before. But now, with the most coveted Duke in England showing interest in her instead of Louisa, the carefully maintained family hierarchy was collapsing. That night, Margaret could not sleep. She kept replaying the evening. The Duke's intense gaze, their conversation about Stoic philosophy, his declaration that he found her interesting. It seemed impossible. Men like him did not choose women like her, but he had asked to call on her. That was undeniable. The next morning, Margaret's mother transformed the drawing room into something resembling a stage set. Fresh flowers appeared. The best tea service was brought out. Margaret was subjected to 3 hours of preparation, her mother insisting on a new dress, elaborate hairstyling, instructions on proper deportment. "You must be charming," her mother coached. "Smile more. Do not discuss books or philosophy. Men find intellectual women threatening. Compliment him. Ask about his estates. Show interest in domestic matters. For once in your life, Margaret, try to be like your sisters." Margaret listened in silence, knowing she would ignore every piece of advice. If the Duke wanted her to be like her sisters, he would have chosen her sisters. He had chosen her. Odd, bookish, honest Margaret. She would not pretend to be someone else. At precisely 2 o'clock, the Duke of Ravencross was announced. Margaret's parents received him in the formal drawing room, her mother practically vibrating with nervous energy, her father, the Earl of Thornton, watching with bemused curiosity. "Your Grace, what an honor," her mother gushed. "We are so delighted you have taken an interest in our Margaret. She is such a unique girl." The Duke's expression remained neutral. "Lady Margaret and I discovered shared intellectual interests last night. I wish to continue our discussion." Margaret's father perked up at this. Unlike his wife, the Earl valued scholarship. "Intellectual interests. What were you discussing?" "Stoic philosophy. Lady Margaret was reading Marcus Aurelius in the original Greek. I found her insights remarkably sophisticated." The Earl beamed with pride. "Margaret has always been the most scholarly of my children. I am pleased someone appreciates her mind." Her mother looked like she wanted to argue that scholarship was not an appropriate quality for attracting husbands, but she held her tongue. After the obligatory pleasantries, the Duke requested permission to walk with Margaret in the garden, chaperoned appropriately by a maid. Her parents agreed, and Margaret found herself alone with him, or as alone as propriety allowed, for the first time. They walked in silence initially. Then the Duke spoke. "Your mother believes I am making a mistake. Your sister believes I am damaged from war. What do you believe, Lady Margaret?" Margaret considered lying, offering some polite platitude. But the Duke had asked for honesty. "I believe you are seeking something different from what most men seek in marriage. I do not know what that something is, but I suspect it has nothing to do with beauty or accomplishment. You are correct. I am seeking a partner, not an ornament. Someone who can engage intellectually, who values substance over superficiality, who will not bore me within 6 months of marriage. And you think I am that person based on one conversation? I think you are worth investigating further. Hence my presence here today." He paused at a garden bench, gestured for her to sit. "Lady Margaret, I am going to be brutally honest with you, because I believe you can handle honesty. Please do. I need a wife. My family demands heirs. Society expects me to marry, but I have no interest in the traditional courtship dance. I find it exhausting and dishonest. I am looking for a practical arrangement with someone intelligent enough to understand what I am offering. Margaret's heart sank slightly. So this was a business transaction, not romance. She should not be disappointed. She had never expected romance, but hearing it stated so clinically still stung. What exactly are you offering, Your Grace? A marriage of partnership, respect, intellectual companionship, financial security, and social position. You would have complete authority over household matters, access to one of England's finest private libraries, and freedom to pursue your scholarly interests. In return, I need heirs and a capable duchess who can manage social obligations I find intolerable. And love? Affection? What role do those play in this arrangement? The Duke's jaw tightened. I am not capable of romantic love, Lady Margaret. War destroyed whatever capacity I had for soft emotions. I can offer respect, loyalty, and partnership, but if you require passionate declarations and romantic gestures, I am the wrong choice. Margaret studied his scarred face, saw the walls he had built around himself. May I ask what happened to you during the war? What made you this way? Nothing I wish to discuss with someone I have known for less than 24 hours. Fair enough. But, Your Grace, if you are proposing a marriage, even a practical one, I need to understand what I would be agreeing to. You speak of being incapable of love. That suggests trauma significant enough to damage your emotional capacity. I would be binding myself legally to a man I barely know. I deserve more information than vague allusions to war damage. The Duke looked surprised by her directness. Most women would have accepted his terms without question, grateful for the opportunity to become a duchess. Margaret was negotiating. You are right. You deserve honesty. He took a breath. I led men into battle for 6 years. I watched soldiers under my command die in ways I would not wish on my worst enemy. I held my closest friend as he bled out, begging me to tell his wife he loved her. I made decisions that saved some lives and cost others. That kind of experience changes you. It strips away your capacity for frivolous emotion. I can no longer pretend to feel things I do not feel. I can no longer engage in romantic theater. I am offering you reality, not fantasy. That is all I have left to offer. Margaret felt unexpected compassion for this damaged man. And you believe I am suited to this arrangement because I am plain and desperate enough to accept it? No. I believe you are suited because you are intelligent enough to understand the value of what I am offering, honest enough to appreciate directness over romantic deception, and strong enough to build a life that does not depend entirely on your husband's emotional availability. You have survived being overlooked your entire life. You have built meaning through scholarship and intellectual pursuit. I am offering you resources to expand that life, plus the social position to protect yourself from your family's dismissal. He was right. Everything he said was accurate and appealing. A practical marriage to a damaged duke was still better than remaining the family spinster, pitied and dismissed. How long do I have to consider your proposal? I am not proposing yet. I am suggesting a courtship, brief, honest, designed to determine if we suit each other practically. 2 weeks. If at the end of that time we both agree the arrangement is viable, I will propose formally. If either of us has doubts, we part ways with no obligation. 2 weeks to decide if I will spend the rest of my life with you. Is that insufficient? I can provide more time if needed. Margaret considered. More time would not change the fundamental calculation. Either she accepted a loveless but respectable marriage, or she remained her family's unmarried burden. 2 weeks is sufficient. But I have conditions. The Duke's eyebrows rose slightly. Conditions. If we are negotiating a business arrangement, I am entitled to terms. First, I want unrestricted access to your library and permission to correspond with scholars. Second, I want involvement in estate management. Not just household management, but actual decision-making about land use, tenant relations, financial matters. Third, I want your word that you will never lie to me. Emotional distance I can accept. Dishonesty I cannot. Those terms are acceptable. Do you have more? One more. I want children. Real children we raise together, not just heirs you view as obligations. If we are bringing lives into this world, they deserve parents who are present, even if those parents do not love each other romantically. Something flickered in the Duke's eyes. Surprise, perhaps respect. Agreed. Are there other conditions? No, those are my terms. What are yours? Honesty, as you said. Competent household management. Discretion about the nature of our arrangement. Society need not know this is a practical marriage rather than a love match. And patience with my limitations. There will be days when I am distant, withdrawn, trapped in memories I cannot share. I need a wife who will not take that personally. I can agree to those terms, though I reserve the right to push you occasionally. If you are trapped in darkness, someone should at least offer a candle. The Duke almost smiled. You are remarkable, Lady Margaret. Most women would have been offended by my cold proposal. You are negotiating terms like a solicitor. I am a realist, Your Grace. You are offering me an escape from a life of being my family's burden and embarrassment. In exchange, you gain a competent partner who will not bore you or expect emotions you cannot provide. It is a fair trade. Why pretend otherwise? Why indeed? He stood, offered his hand to help her rise. I will call on you daily for the next 2 weeks. We will spend time together, determine compatibility. At the end of that period, we will both make our decision. Over the following 2 weeks, the Duke courted Margaret with unusual intensity. He arrived each afternoon and they would talk, not about frivolous topics, but about philosophy, history, politics, estate management. He tested her intellect, her opinions, her capacity for serious discourse. Margaret discovered he was brilliant, well-read, and deeply cynical about human nature. War had stripped away his illusions about nobility and honor. He saw the world in stark terms: power, resources, survival. Romantic love was a luxury for people who had not witnessed the worst of humanity. But beneath the cynicism, Margaret glimpsed something else. Not softness exactly, but exhaustion. He was tired of pretending, tired of performing the role society expected, tired of being the decorated war hero when he felt like a haunted survivor. On the 5th day of their courtship, Margaret asked him about his scar. Shrapnel from an explosion. I was lucky it only damaged my face. 3 men standing beside me died instantly. Do you feel guilty that you survived? He looked at her sharply. How did you know? Because you speak about your survival as luck rather than fortune. Because you have built walls so high that no emotion can reach you. Because you are punishing yourself by refusing to feel anything good. Survivor's guilt is a common response to trauma, Your Grace. You are not unique in experiencing it. And what would you suggest I do about it? Stop punishing yourself by denying yourself any possibility of happiness. Live fully instead of merely existing. Honor those who died by actually living, not by creating a walking memorial to their deaths. The Duke stared at her for a long moment. No one has ever spoken to me like this. My family tiptoes around my moods. Society treats me like fragile porcelain. You speak to me as if I am a rational adult, capable of hearing difficult truths. You are a rational adult. I am simply treating you accordingly. On the 10th day, the Duke took Margaret to see Ravenscross Manor, his primary estate. It was massive. Over 100 rooms, 10,000 acres, hundreds of tenants. The library alone contained over 20,000 volumes. Margaret stood in the library, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of knowledge surrounding her. This is extraordinary. It would be yours. To organize, expand, use as you see fit. My father was a collector, I am not. But I recognize that for someone like you, access to this collection is valuable. Valuable? Your Grace, this is worth more than any jewels or gowns. This is everything I have ever wanted. Then we are well matched. You value what I can provide, and I value what you can provide. That is as close to love as practical people achieve. On the 14th day, the final day of their trial courtship, the Duke arrived at the Thornton residence with a serious expression. I have made my decision, Lady Margaret. Have you made yours? Margaret had spent 2 weeks considering every angle. A loveless marriage to a damaged man, financial security and social position, intellectual partnership, but emotional distance. Access to everything she had ever wanted academically, at the cost of romantic dreams she had never expected to fulfill anyway. Yes, I have decided. And I accept your proposal, Your Grace, if you are still offering it. The Duke nodded, pulled a ring from his pocket. A massive emerald surrounded by diamonds. This was my grandmother's. She was, by all accounts, the most intelligent woman in her generation. It seems appropriate that you should wear her ring. He slipped it onto Margaret's finger. It was slightly loose but beautiful, and it felt like a seal, binding her to this choice, to this man, to this practical future. We will marry in 6 weeks. Is that sufficient time to prepare? More than sufficient. Your Grace, may I ask one question? Of course. Do you have any regret about this choice? Any wish that you had chosen my sister Louisa instead? The Duke looked at her with something approaching incredulity. Your sister is beautiful, accomplished and utterly vapid. I would have gone mad within a month. You, Lady Margaret, are the only woman I have met who can hold an intelligent conversation, who does not flinch from difficult truths, and who has the strength to marry a man incapable of loving her. No, I have no regrets, do you? Ask me again in 10 years. I will have a more informed answer then. The Duke almost smiled. Fair enough. The engagement announcement shocked London society. The Duke of Ravencross, the most sought-after bachelor in England, was marrying plain Margaret Thornton. Not beautiful Louisa, not any of the season's diamonds. Margaret. The gossip was vicious. Society matrons speculated that Margaret must have compromised him somehow. Others suggested the Duke had suffered brain damage during the war. A few, more charitably, proposed that he valued intellect over beauty, though this was said with such condescension that it hardly qualified as charitable. Margaret's family struggled to comprehend what had happened. Her father was delighted. He had always valued Margaret's mind, and was pleased someone else finally recognized it. Her mother was confused and slightly resentful that her least marriageable daughter had secured the best match, but her sisters, particularly Louisa, were furious. It makes no sense, Louisa complained at a family dinner 3 days after the engagement. You are plain, boring, and unmarriageable. The Duke should have chosen me. I am everything a duchess should be. Perhaps the Duke wants something different from what previous dukes wanted, Margaret said calmly. There is nothing different about you except that you are strange. The Duke must be damaged. That is the only explanation. He is damaged. He survived 6 years of war, but that does not make his choice invalid. Cecilia, usually the more diplomatic sister, added her perspective. Margaret, you must understand how this looks to society. You have no accomplishments, no beauty, no charm, yet you secured the century's best match. People will assume manipulation or scandal. Let them assume what they wish. The Duke and I have an understanding. That is sufficient. Arabella, the eldest and usually the wisest, studied Margaret carefully. You do not love him. It was not a question. Margaret considered lying, but chose honesty. No, nor does he love me. We have a practical arrangement built on mutual respect and shared intellectual interests. It is more honest than most society marriages. But Margaret, a lifetime without love, how will you bear it? The same way I have borne a lifetime of being told I am insufficient. By focusing on what I do have rather than what I lack, the Duke is offering me everything I have ever wanted except romantic love. I can live without romance. I cannot live without meaning. Her sisters exchanged glances that suggested they found this deeply tragic. But Margaret felt no tragedy. She had made a clear-eyed choice. She would be a duchess, have access to unlimited books, intellectual partnership with a brilliant man, and escape from her family's condescension. That was more than she had ever expected from life. The 6 weeks before the wedding passed quickly. Margaret worked with the Duke's household staff to prepare for her transition to Ravencross Manor. She met with his steward, his housekeeper, his man of business. She reviewed estate accounts, tenant records, household budgets. The Duke had not exaggerated when he said she would have real authority. He introduced her to all key staff as Lady Margaret, who will be making decisions about household and estate management. Her word is law. Treat her directions as you would treat mine. The staff, initially skeptical of a 24-year-old duchess, quickly learned that Margaret was competent, fair, and deeply interested in the estate's success. She asked intelligent questions, made sound decisions, and treated everyone with respect, regardless of their position. You are good at this, the Duke observed one afternoon as they reviewed tenant requests together. Estate management. You have natural aptitude. I managed my father's household for years. No one noticed because I am unmarriageable, Margaret, but I have been running a complex estate since I was 18. I simply never received credit for it. You will receive credit here, and compensation. I am establishing a quarterly allowance of £5,000 for your personal use. Additionally, you will have full access to estate funds for any improvements or projects you deem necessary. Margaret's breath caught. £5,000 quarterly was more money than she had imagined possessing in a lifetime. Your Grace, that is extraordinarily generous. It is fair compensation for the work you will be doing. You are not merely decorative duchess. You are essential partner. You should be compensated accordingly. The wedding took place on a rainy June morning at the Duke's family chapel. It was a small ceremony, immediate family only, no elaborate society spectacle. Margaret wore a simple ivory gown, no elaborate trousseau. The Duke wore formal black, his expression unreadable. They spoke their vows with businesslike efficiency. No trembling voices, no tears, no passionate declarations. Just two people entering a contract, witnessed by God and family. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, the Duke kissed Margaret briefly, chastely, a formality, not affection. Then they turned to face their small audience as the Duke and Duchess of Ravencross. Margaret's mother wept, though whether from joy or confusion was unclear. Her sisters looked variously resentful, pitying, and baffled. Her father beamed with genuine pride. The Duke's family was smaller, his widowed mother, the Dowager Duchess, and his younger sister, Lady Helena. The Dowager studied Margaret with sharp assessment throughout the ceremony. After the wedding breakfast, the Dowager requested a private audience with Margaret. "You are not what I expected," the Dowager said without preamble. "I am aware. Most people expected your son to choose someone beautiful. I expected him to choose someone he loved, but he has told me frankly that this is a practical arrangement. You are aware of the terms?" "Yes, Your Grace. Your son and I have been honest with each other about the nature of this marriage. And you accept a loveless match? At your age, with your whole life ahead of you?" Margaret met the older woman's gaze steadily. "I accept a partnership built on respect, intellectual companionship, and mutual benefit. Is that so much worse than marriages built on fleeting attraction or financial desperation? At least we are honest about what we are building." The Dowager's expression softened slightly. "You are stronger than you look, Lady Margaret. My son needs strength. He returned from war broken in ways I do not fully understand. If you can provide stability and partnership, that may be enough. But child, do not give up entirely on the possibility of love. Sometimes it arrives when least expected. Your son has been clear that he is incapable of love. My son has been clear that he is currently incapable of love. Time and healing change people. Do not close your heart entirely based on his present limitations." After the wedding, they traveled immediately to Ravencross Manor. No honeymoon trip, no romantic getaway. The Duke had been explicit that he found travel exhausting and wanted to settle into married life at his primary estate. That first night, standing in her new rooms, a duchess's suite more elaborate than anything Margaret had ever imagined, she felt the weight of her choice. She was married to a man who could not love her. She would spend the rest of her life in a partnership devoid of affection. A knock on the connecting door interrupted her thoughts. The Duke entered, still in his formal attire, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to clarify expectations for tonight," he said without preamble. "I understand that consummation is typically expected on wedding nights. However, given the practical nature of our arrangement, I thought we might approach this more rationally." Margaret felt her face heat. They had not discussed the physical aspects of marriage during their courtship. "What are you suggesting?" "That we delay intimacy until you are comfortable. There is no urgency to produce heirs immediately. You have just entered a strange house, married a man you barely know. Adding physical demands tonight seems unnecessarily burdensome." Margaret felt unexpected gratitude. "Thank you. That is considerate. It is practical. Forcing intimacy before establishing comfort serves no purpose. When you are ready, you need only inform me. Until then, we will maintain separate bedrooms and focus on building our working partnership. And when we do, when intimacy becomes necessary, what should I expect?" The Duke's jaw tightened. "Efficiency. I am not capable of romantic love, as I have said. Physical relations will be approached as necessary obligation, accomplished with respect, but without sentiment. If that is unacceptable, tell me now." Margaret thought about it. She had never expected passionate love. Efficient obligation with respect was more than many wives received. "It is acceptable, though I reserve the right to request tenderness, even if sentiment is impossible. That seems fair. Anything else we should clarify tonight?" "Yes. What do I call you?" "Your Grace seems formal for a husband. My given name is Adrian. You may use it in private. In public, Your Grace or Ravencross is appropriate." "Adrian." Margaret tested the name. It felt strange, intimate in a way their relationship was not. "Will you call me Margaret, if you prefer? Or would you prefer formality?" "Margaret in private, Lady Ravencross in public. That seems appropriate. Adrian nodded. Then we have established our terms. I will leave you to rest. Tomorrow we begin building our partnership in earnest. He left through the connecting door, closing it firmly behind him. Margaret sat on her elaborate bed in her Duchess's rooms, married to a man who saw her as a business partner rather than a wife, and tried to feel satisfied with her choice. She had everything she wanted except love. That would have to be enough. Over the following months, Margaret and Adrian settled into their marriage with business-like efficiency. They breakfasted together each morning, discussing the day's obligations. Adrian managed estate finances and larger business concerns. Margaret managed household staff, tenant relations and social obligations. They worked well together. Adrian respected Margaret's intelligence and deferred to her judgment on domestic matters. Margaret appreciated his directness and his willingness to share real authority rather than relegating her to purely decorative roles. But there was no warmth, no casual touches, no private jokes, no moments of genuine connection beyond intellectual partnership. Adrian was punctiliously polite, consistently respectful, and utterly distant emotionally. Margaret told herself this was acceptable. She had known what she was agreeing to, a practical marriage, not a love match. But late at night, alone in her Duchess's rooms, Margaret sometimes allowed herself to feel the loneliness of sharing a life with someone who viewed her as a competent colleague rather than a beloved partner. 3 months into their marriage, Margaret's sister Louisa visited Ravencross Manor. She arrived unannounced, clearly expecting to find Margaret miserable and regretting her choice. Instead, she found Margaret confidently managing a household crisis. 3 tenant cottages needed urgent repairs before winter, requiring immediate reallocation of funds from the household budget. "You seem occupied," Louisa observed, watching Margaret direct workers with calm authority. "I am occupied. Being a duchess is actual work, not just wearing tiaras and hosting balls. But are you happy, truly happy, married to a man who treats you like a business associate?" Margaret considered the question honestly. "I am satisfied. I have meaningful work, intellectual stimulation, financial security and respect. Is that happiness? Perhaps not, but it is more than I ever expected from life. But Margaret, you have no love, no affection. Adrian barely speaks to you beyond necessary business discussions. How can you bear such coldness?" "Because I was raised with coldness, Louisa. You and our sisters were loved for your beauty. I was tolerated for my usefulness. Adrian's emotional distance is not so different from what I have always known. At least here my competence is valued. That is tragic. Is it? Or is it simply realistic? Most marriages are built on convenience, obligation, or financial necessity. At least Adrian and I are honest about our arrangement. We do not pretend to feel what we do not feel." Louisa left, shaking her head, convinced Margaret was deluding herself. But Margaret genuinely believed she had made the best possible choice given her circumstances. 4 months into the marriage, Margaret discovered she was with child. She informed Adrian over breakfast, the same way she informed him about any estate matter. "I am pregnant." The physician confirms approximately 6 weeks along. Adrian set down his tea with careful precision. "I see. Are you well? Do you require anything?" "I am experiencing some morning sickness, but nothing concerning. The physician says everything appears normal." "Then we will ensure you have whatever support you need. I will inform the housekeeper to adjust your duties accordingly. You should not overtax yourself. I am pregnant, not ill. I can continue my normal activities for several months. Nevertheless, we will take precautions. An heir is too important to risk through carelessness. An heir, not our child, not a baby we created together. An heir, a duty fulfilled, an obligation discharged." Margaret felt something crack inside her. "Is that all this child means to you? A necessary heir?" Adrian looked genuinely confused by her emotion. "What else should it mean? We agreed to produce children as part of our practical arrangement. I am pleased we have succeeded in this obligation. Adrian, this is a human being, a person we created together. Can you not feel even a glimmer of excitement or anticipation beyond duty?" His expression closed off completely. "I told you from the beginning that I was incapable of soft emotions. War stripped that capacity away. I can provide material support, ensure the child's needs are met, fulfill all obligations of fatherhood. But if you require me to feel tender emotions, you will be perpetually disappointed." Margaret stood abruptly. "Excuse me, I need air." She fled to the gardens, fighting tears. She had agreed to a loveless marriage, yes, but somehow she had not imagined that extending to their children. She had hoped, foolishly, naively, that a baby might soften Adrian, might crack through his emotional walls. But he viewed their coming child the same way he viewed crop rotation or tenant rents. A necessary obligation, nothing more. That evening, Adrian sought Margaret out in the library. She was reading Marcus Aurelius again, seeking comfort in Stoic philosophy. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. Margaret looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For my response this morning. You were sharing important news about our child, and I reduced it to transactional obligation. That was callous. It was honest. You were being who you are. Honesty without compassion is cruelty. I claimed I could not feel tender emotions. That is not entirely accurate. I choose not to feel them because feeling means vulnerability, and vulnerability led to unbearable pain during the war. But Margaret, you deserve better than a husband who treats our child as a line item in an estate ledger." Margaret set her book aside. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I will try. I cannot promise to suddenly become a warm, affectionate father, but I can promise to see this child as a person rather than an obligation. I can promise to be present, not just materially but emotionally, to whatever degree I am capable." It was not a declaration of love, but coming from Adrian it was significant. "Thank you. That means more than you might realize." Adrian sat in the chair across from her, silent for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. "Tell me about your childhood. You have mentioned your sisters, but you have never spoken about what it was like being the overlooked daughter. Why do you want to know?" "Because I am about to become a father. I want to understand what damages children, so I can avoid inflicting those damages on ours." Margaret considered how to answer. "My mother compared me constantly to my sisters. Nothing I did was enough, because I was not beautiful like them. My accomplishments meant nothing because they were academic, rather than fashionable. I learned young that my worth was conditional. I was valuable when useful, invisible when not. That is what I want our child to never feel. I want them to know they are valuable inherently, not conditionally." Adrian absorbed this. "My father was distant, not cruel, but absent emotionally. He saw me as the heir, a role to fulfill rather than a son to love. When he died, I felt relief rather than grief. That should not be a child's response to a parent's death. Then we will do better. We may not love each other romantically, but we can love our child properly. We can give them what neither of us received." "Agreed." Adrian stood to leave, then paused. "Margaret, you said earlier that my emotional distance was not so different from what you always knew, that your family's coldness prepared you for mine. That is a damning indictment of both your family and myself. I did not mean it as criticism. Nevertheless, it is true. You married me expecting coldness because your own family taught you to expect nothing better. I need you to understand something. You deserve warmth. You deserve affection. My inability to provide it is my failure, not your insufficiency. Do not ever think otherwise." He left before Margaret could respond. She sat alone in the library, tears streaming down her face. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to her, and it came from the man who claimed he could not feel soft emotions. Perhaps the Dowager had been right. Perhaps Adrian was more capable of love than he believed. Perhaps time and healing would reveal capacities he thought war had destroyed. Or perhaps Margaret was deluding herself, reading warmth into simple decency because she was starved for affection. Over the following months, Adrian made visible efforts to engage with Margaret's pregnancy beyond clinical necessity. He asked about her health, her comfort, her concerns. He accompanied her to physician appointments. He discussed names, nursery arrangements, plans for the child's education. It was not warmth exactly, but it was presence. And for Margaret, presence was more than she had expected. 6 months into her pregnancy, Margaret received devastating news. Her father, the Earl of Thornton, had died suddenly of an apoplexy. She was summoned home for the funeral. Adrian insisted on accompanying her. "You should not travel alone in your condition, and regardless of your family's past treatment of you, grief is grief. You need support." The funeral was difficult. Margaret's mother collapsed in dramatic mourning. Her sisters wept beautifully. Margaret felt numb. She had loved her father, but he had never protected her from her mother's comparisons or her sister's dismissals. His love had been passive, inadequate. At the wake, Louisa cornered Margaret. "Father's death makes me realize how fragile life is. Margaret, are you truly happy? Because you look so tired, so worn down. Marriage to the Duke seems to be exhausting you. I am 6 months pregnant. Of course I am tired. It is more than physical exhaustion. You look diminished, like you are disappearing. The Duke treats you with such cold formality. Does he ever show you any affection at all?" Margaret considered lying, but she was too exhausted for pretense. "No, but I knew that going in. He was honest about his limitations. But surely you hoped things might change, that he might learn to love you. Hope is dangerous, Louisa. I learned that lesson years ago. I do not hope for what I cannot have. I focus on what I do have: respect, partnership, security. That is enough. It should not have to be enough. You deserve love, Margaret. Real love, not cold respect." Adrian found Margaret later that evening, sitting alone in her childhood bedroom. She was crying quietly, trying to muffle the sounds so no one would hear. "Margaret," he entered without knocking, closed the door behind him. "What is wrong? Is it the baby? Are you in pain?" "No, I am just overwhelmed. My father is dead. My sister pities me because you do not love me. I'm exhausted and pregnant and questioning every choice I have made." Adrian knelt beside her chair with visible difficulty. His war injuries made kneeling painful. "What did Louisa say to you?" "That I look diminished. That marriage to you is exhausting me, that I deserve love, not just cold respect." "She is not entirely wrong." Margaret looked at him sharply. "What? You do look exhausted, and I have been cold. Not intentionally cruel, but distant in ways that must be difficult. Louisa is correct that you deserve better. But Margaret, I am trying. Within my limitations, I am trying to be more present, more engaged. Is it enough? Clearly not. But it is all I know how to give. Adrian, I am not asking you to change who you are. I agreed to this arrangement with full knowledge of your limitations. But you are still human. You still need warmth, affection, emotional support, and I am failing to provide those things. Tell me how to do better. Please, I do not want you to feel diminished. I do not want you disappearing into exhaustion and isolation." Margaret wiped her tears. "I do not know what I need. I thought partnership and respect would be enough, but carrying your child, mourning my father, facing my family's pity, it has made me realize how lonely I am, and I do not know how to ask for more without asking you to be someone you are not." Adrian took her hand, the first time he had initiated physical contact beyond absolute necessity. "Then let me try something different. Not romantic love, which I genuinely cannot feel, but perhaps tenderness, care, small gestures of affection that acknowledge you are more than a business partner. Would that help? I do not know, but I am willing to try anything." Adrian helped her stand, held her carefully. "We will figure this out together. Our marriage may not be traditional, but it does not have to be cold. I can do better. I will do better." They returned to Ravencross Manor the next day, and Adrian, true to his word, began making small changes. He started having tea with Margaret in the afternoons, not to discuss estate business, but simply to sit together. He asked about her reading, her thoughts, her concerns beyond household management. He began touching her more, not dramatically, but small gestures. A hand on her shoulder when passing, helping her rise from chairs as her pregnancy progressed, sitting beside her on the settee rather than across from her. Margaret felt the ice between them beginning to thaw. Adrian was not suddenly warm or affectionate, but he was making genuine effort to connect beyond pure functionality. 7 months pregnant, Margaret was reviewing estate accounts when she found a discrepancy. Money diverted to an account she did not recognize. Substantial amounts, hundreds of pounds monthly. She brought it to Adrian's attention that evening. "What is this?" The account listed as private allocation. Adrian's expression shuttered immediately. "That is personal business, not estate-related." "Adrian, we agreed to complete honesty. If you are diverting estate funds to a private account, I need to understand why. Are you in debt? Supporting someone? What is this?" "It is none of your concern." Margaret felt anger flare. "We are married. We manage this estate together. Hundreds of pounds disappearing monthly is absolutely my concern. What are you hiding?" Adrian stood abruptly, walked to the window, his back rigid. "I am supporting the widow and children of my closest friend, the man who died in my arms during the war. I promised him I would care for his family. I have been sending them money monthly for 3 years. That is what the account is for. Margaret's anger dissolved into something else. Why would you hide that? That is honorable, Adrian. Why keep it secret? Because it is mine to carry. Because he died because of decisions I made. Because supporting his widow is the least I can do to atone for failing to protect him. Because I did not want you or anyone else turning it into some noble gesture when it is actually self-flagellation. Margaret crossed to him, placed her hand on his back. Adrian, you cannot carry every death. You cannot punish yourself forever for surviving when others did not. I know what you think I should do. Let go, move forward, stop living in the past. I have heard it from my mother, my sister, my physician. But Margaret, you do not understand. I gave the order that got my friend killed. I chose the strategy that led to his death. His blood is on my hands. Supporting his widow does not absolve me, but at least it does something. Margaret felt her throat tighten. What was his name? Your friend. Thomas. Thomas Ashford. He was my lieutenant, but more than that, my closest friend since childhood. We enlisted together, fought together. He was supposed to survive. He had a wife and 2 small children. I was the expendable one, no family depending on me. But he died and I lived. That is the fundamental injustice I carry. How did he die? Adrian's shoulders tensed. We were holding a position. I had to choose between retreating and losing strategic ground, or holding and risking casualties. I chose to hold. Thomas was killed in the fighting that followed. If I had chosen differently, he would be alive. His children would have a father. His wife would not be living on my guilt payments, or the entire campaign might have failed, resulting in hundreds more deaths. You made a military decision with incomplete information and terrible options. That is not the same as murder. It feels the same. Margaret moved to face him, forcing him to look at her. Adrian, I need you to hear me. You are allowed to grieve Thomas. You are allowed to honor his memory by supporting his family, but you are not required to punish yourself eternally. You are not required to refuse all happiness because he is dead. Living fully does not dishonor his memory. It honors it by making his sacrifice meaningful. How can I live fully when he cannot live at all? Because you are here. Because you survived. Because refusing to live is wasting the life Thomas died protecting. Do you think he would want you imprisoned by guilt? Or would he want you to have the life, the love, the family he can no longer have? Adrian's carefully controlled facade cracked. Tears streamed down his scarred face. He told me with his last breath to tell his wife he loved her, to promise I would care for his children, and I have. But I have not been able to do what he really wanted, to live the life he could not, because living feels like betrayal. Margaret pulled him close, held him as he wept for the first time since the war. She said nothing, just provided presence as he grieved properly, finally, for the friend he had lost and the guilt he had carried. When his tears subsided, Adrian pulled back, looking embarrassed. I apologize, that was inappropriate. That was human. You have been performing stoicism for 3 years. You were overdue for actual grief. I do not know how to move forward, Margaret. I have built my entire identity around being emotionally unavailable, around refusing connection to protect myself from further loss. But that is not sustainable, and it is not fair to you or to our coming child. Then we rebuild, together. You do not have to suddenly become someone else, but perhaps you can allow yourself small steps toward emotional availability, not all at once, just gradually, as you are ready. Over the following weeks, something shifted fundamentally in their marriage. Adrian began sharing more about the war, about Thomas, about the nightmares that still woke him most nights. Margaret listened without judgment, providing the witness he had never had. In return, Margaret shared more about her own pain, the years of being dismissed by her family, the loneliness of being overlooked, the fear that even now she was valued only for her usefulness. They were not in love, but they were building something deeper than their original practical arrangement. They were building genuine partnership, not just functional cooperation, but emotional intimacy based on shared vulnerability. 8 months pregnant, Margaret woke one night to find Adrian sitting at the foot of her bed, watching her sleep. I did not mean to wake you, he said quietly. What are you doing? Making sure you are still breathing. I have nightmares where you die in childbirth. I know it is irrational, but I cannot seem to stop them. Margaret's heart clenched. Adrian, I'm going to be fine. Women give birth every day. Thomas thought he would be fine too. War taught me that no one is guaranteed tomorrow. I find myself concerned. About you, about the baby, about the possibility of loss. That is called caring. You are feeling attachment despite your best efforts to remain detached. It is terrifying. I had convinced myself I was incapable of these emotions. Safer to feel nothing than to risk feeling everything. But Margaret, somewhere in the past 8 months, you stopped being a practical arrangement. You became someone I value beyond utility, someone whose loss would devastate me. I do not know when that happened, but it did. Margaret reached for his hand. I care about you too, more than I expected, more than I intended. We may have started as a business arrangement, but we have become something else. I do not know what to call it, but it matters. Is it love? Margaret considered. I do not know. What does love feel like? I have never experienced it before. Nor have I. Not romantic love. I loved Thomas as a brother, loved my family as obligation. But this, wanting your happiness, fearing your loss, finding joy in your presence. I do not know if that is love or simply attachment. Perhaps love and attachment are the same thing. Perhaps we have been building love all along without naming it as such. Margaret went into labor on a cold December morning. It was 3 weeks early, frightening both her and Adrian. He refused to leave her side despite the midwife's protests that men did not belong in birthing rooms. She is my wife. I stay. The labor was long and difficult, 20 hours of pain that left Margaret exhausted and delirious. Adrian held her hand throughout, speaking to her constantly, providing the steady presence she needed. Finally, after what felt like eternity, their daughter was born. Small, red-faced, screaming with impressive volume. "A girl, Your Grace," the midwife announced, "healthy and absolutely perfect." Adrian took his daughter with trembling hands, stared down at her with an expression Margaret had never seen before. Wonder. Pure, unguarded wonder. She is so small. How can something this small even exist? She exists because we created her. Your daughter, Adrian. Our daughter. He looked at Margaret, tears streaming down his face. Margaret, I cannot describe what I feel. It is overwhelming, terrifying. This small person is depending on us completely. What if I fail her? What if I cannot be the father she deserves? You will not fail her, because you already love her. I see it in your face. I did not know I was capable of this, of feeling this much. I thought war had destroyed my capacity for love, but holding her, looking at her, I feel everything. Everything I thought was dead inside me. Margaret, what have we done? Margaret laughed through exhausted tears. We have become parents, and apparently you have discovered you are capable of love after all. They named their daughter Caroline, after Adrian's grandmother. She was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, Adrian's dark hair and Margaret's hazel eyes. Adrian was transformed by fatherhood. The man who had claimed emotional unavailability spent hours holding Caroline, talking to her, marveling at every small development. He was tender, patient, utterly devoted. I thought I could not love, he told Margaret one evening as they watched Caroline sleep. I was convinced war had broken that capacity permanently, but it was not broken. It was just locked away behind walls I built to protect myself from further pain. Caroline broke through those walls effortlessly. She gave me back my heart. Not just Caroline. You have been softening for months. You grieved Thomas properly. You shared your fears with me. You allowed vulnerability. Caroline was the final step, but you were already healing. You healed me, Margaret. Do not think otherwise. You refused to accept my emotional distance. You pushed me, challenged me, demanded I be more than I thought possible. Without you, I would still be that cold, closed-off man who proposed a loveless marriage. 6 months after Caroline's birth, Margaret realized something had fundamentally shifted in their marriage. Adrian was affectionate, not performatively but genuinely. He touched her often, sought her company, looked at her with warmth that had nothing to do with duty. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Adrian said something that made Margaret's breath catch. "I love you." Margaret froze. "What?" "I love you, Margaret. I have been trying to find the courage to say it for months. I love you, not as a practical partner, not as the mother of my child, but as you brilliant, strong, patient Margaret, who saw worth in a broken man and refused to let him stay broken. I love you." Margaret felt tears spill down her cheeks. When did this happen? Gradually. Then all at once. I think I started falling in love with you during our courtship, when you negotiated terms like a solicitor instead of simpering gratefully. I fell deeper when you confronted me about Thomas, when you held me while I grieved. I fell completely when I watched you labor for 20 hours to bring our daughter into the world. But I did not recognize it as love until recently. I thought love had to be dramatic, overwhelming, instantaneous. I did not realize it could be quiet, built over months of choosing each other daily. Margaret crossed to him, cupped his scarred face in her hands. I love you too. I have for longer than I wanted to admit. I told myself it was foolish to love someone who could not love me back. But I could not help it. You were trying so hard, changing so much, showing me parts of yourself you had hidden from everyone. How could I not love you? Adrian kissed her then, properly for the first time. Not the chaste wedding kiss or the perfunctory gestures of duty, but a real kiss, full of emotion and promise and the love they had built, without meaning to. We should probably tell Caroline she saved both her parents, Adrian said when they finally broke apart. I was drowning in guilt and isolation. You were resigned to being unloved. We rescued each other by building this family. She will be impossibly spoiled if we tell her she saved us. Then we will balance her by giving her siblings who keep her humble. Margaret laughed. How many children are you proposing? As many as you are willing to bear. I want our house filled with life, with noise, with the beautiful chaos we were both denied growing up. I want to build something so full of love that no child ever feels overlooked or insufficient. Over the following years, they did exactly that. Caroline was joined by twin sons, Edward and James, when she was 2. Then another daughter, Helena, arrived 2 years later. Finally, their youngest son, Thomas, named for Adrian's fallen friend, completed their family. The house that had been silent and formal when Margaret first arrived became loud, chaotic, full of children's laughter and the comfortable disorder of a well-loved home. Adrian was a devoted father. He played with his children, read them stories, taught them everything from Latin to swordplay. He was patient with their questions, present for their milestones, unembarrassed by the messiness of active parenting. Margaret watched him with wonder. This was the man who had claimed he was incapable of love, who had proposed a cold, practical marriage, who had built walls so high that emotion could not reach him. Now he was reading bedtime stories in silly voices, getting covered in mud, playing with his sons, letting his daughters braid his hair while he reviewed estate accounts. You were wrong about yourself, Margaret told him one evening after they had tucked all 5 children into bed. You told me you were broken beyond repair. That war had destroyed your capacity for love. But Adrian, you are the most loving father I have ever witnessed. You give our children everything you never received, because you showed me it was possible, because you refused to accept my limitations as permanent, because you loved me before I could love myself. Margaret, everything good in my life exists because you were brave enough to demand more from me than I thought I could give. Their marriage became a model for their children. Edward once asked his father, "Did you love Mama when you married her?" Adrian considered how to answer honestly. "No, I was too broken to love anyone. But your mother was patient with me. She helped me heal. She showed me that love is not just feeling, it is choice. Choosing someone every day, working to be better for them, building a life together through intentional effort. I love your mother more now than I thought it was possible to love anyone. But that love was built over years, not instantaneous. So love grows? The best love grows. The kind of love that lasts is not based on initial passion. It is based on choosing each other repeatedly, through difficulties and joys, through all the ordinary moments that make up a life. Margaret, overhearing this conversation, felt her heart swell. This was the man who had proposed a loveless marriage, who had told her she would never be more than a practical arrangement, who had been so convinced he was incapable of feeling. Now he was teaching their son that real love was built through daily choice and intentional effort. 10 years into their marriage, Margaret's mother died. The funeral brought the Thornton sisters together: Arabella, Dorothea, Cecilia, Louisa, and Margaret. Louisa pulled Margaret aside after the service. "I owe you an apology. When you married the Duke, I thought you were settling for lovelessness. I pitied you for accepting a cold marriage. But Margaret, I see now that you built something extraordinary. The Duke adores you. Your children are happy and well-adjusted. Your house is full of warmth. You have everything I thought you would never achieve. And you?" Margaret asked gently. "Are you happy?" Louisa had married an earl 3 years after Margaret's wedding. It had seemed like a good match. Title, wealth, handsome husband. I am comfortable, respected. But Margaret, my husband barely speaks to me beyond necessary courtesies. We live parallel lives under the same roof. I have the romance I thought I wanted, but not the partnership you have. I chose wrong, and you chose right. You could not have known. Marriage is always a gamble. I gambled on Adrian's capacity for growth. You gambled on initial attraction. Neither choice was wrong, they just led to different outcomes. Cecilia joined them. I must admit, Margaret, we all thought you were making a terrible mistake. Marrying a cold, damaged man who admitted he could not love you. But he changed. Or perhaps you changed him. Either way, you have the best marriage of all of us. Arabella and Dorothea agreed. Your husband looks at you like you hung the stars. He speaks of you with such respect and affection. Our husbands treat us cordially but distantly. You achieved what we all wanted. Genuine partnership and love. Margaret felt vindication, yes, but also sadness. Her sisters had been groomed to value beauty and accomplishment. They had married well by conventional standards, but they had not found the depth of connection Margaret had accidentally built with Adrian. It was not easy, Margaret told them honestly. Adrian and I started from nothing. No love, no affection, just mutual need. We built everything from that foundation. It took work, patience, vulnerability. But yes, we succeeded. I have love I never expected to find. That evening, Margaret told Adrian about the conversation. My sisters envy me. The women who were chosen first, who were desired for their beauty, they envy the woman who was never chosen at all. Adrian pulled her close. You were chosen, Margaret. I chose you, not randomly, not out of desperation. I chose you because even in my broken state, I recognized quality when I saw it. Your sisters are beautiful, yes, but you are extraordinary. Intelligence, strength, compassion, patience, you possess everything that actually matters. I chose better than I knew when I chose you. You told me on our wedding night that I would never be your true wife. Do you remember? I remember. It is one of the stupidest things I have ever said. You have been my true wife from the moment you refused to accept my emotional unavailability. You fought for our marriage when I was ready to settle for cold functionality. You are the truest wife, the only wife, the love of my life. Margaret kissed him. We should probably tell our children their parents' love story. They think we have always been this way. What would we tell them? That I proposed a loveless marriage? That I was convinced I could never love again? That their mother was brave enough to bet on my capacity for change? Exactly that, because it is the truth, and because they should know that real love is not instant or easy. It is built through choice, work, and the courage to be vulnerable. Over the following years, they did tell their children the full story, not the sanitized version, but the honest truth, that Adrian had been broken by war, that Margaret had been overlooked her entire life, that they had entered marriage with no love, only practical needs, and that through patience, vulnerability, and daily choice, they had built love that surpassed anything they had thought possible. Caroline, their eldest, asked, "But Mama, were you not afraid? Marrying a man who said he could never love you?" Terrified, but more afraid of staying where I was. Unloved, undervalued, dismissed. Your father offered me respect and resources. I took the gamble that respect might grow into something more. And it did. Eventually. Not immediately, not easily. But yes, it did. Their sons, Edward and James, asked their father, "How did you know Mama was the right choice, when so many other women wanted to marry you?" Adrian thought carefully. "I did not know. I made the best guess I could with limited information. Your mother was intelligent when others were vapid, honest when others performed, strong when others were fragile. I recognized quality even when I could not fully appreciate it. And I was lucky or blessed that she was patient enough to wait for me to become worthy of her." Thomas, their youngest, asked the hardest question. "Papa, do you still think about the war? About the friend you lost? Every day, he is why you carry his name." "But Thomas, I learned something important from your mother. Honoring the dead does not require refusing to live. I honor my friend Thomas by being the father and husband he wanted to be, but never could. By building the family he would have cherished. By living fully enough for both of us." 15 years into their marriage, Margaret and Adrian returned to the ballroom where they first met. It was hosting a ball for the next generation of debutantes, including their daughter Caroline, now 17. They stood in the same spot where Margaret had been reading Marcus Aurelius, where Adrian had first approached her, where everything had begun. "Do you remember what you thought of me that night?" Adrian asked. "I thought you were dangerous, haunted, nothing like the charming nobleman who usually courted debutantes. I also thought you would never look twice at plain, bookish me, that you would choose someone like my sisters. And I thought you were the most interesting person in the room. You were not performing. You were genuinely yourself, hiding in a corner reading Greek philosophy. Everyone else was trying desperately to be noticed. You were trying to disappear. That fascinated me, because you understood it, because you were also trying to disappear." "Exactly. We recognized each other, Margaret. Two people hiding from the world in different ways, and somehow we saved each other." They watched Caroline dance with a young earl, watched their daughter navigate the social rituals they had both found so exhausting. She was lovely, yes, but more importantly, she was confident. She knew her worth. She had been raised by parents who valued her intelligence and character, not just her appearance. "She will not settle for a cold marriage," Margaret observed. "She has seen what real partnership looks like. She will demand more." "Good. That is what we wanted. To raise children who know they deserve love, who will not accept less than they are worth." "We did well, Adrian. Despite our imperfect beginning, despite all our struggles, we built something beautiful. We did. And Margaret, I need you to know, I would choose you again, every single time. If I could go back to that ballroom, knowing everything that would follow, all the difficulties and the growth and the love we built, I would still walk directly to you. I would still choose the woman reading Greek philosophy over every other option. And I would still negotiate terms like a solicitor, instead of simpering gratefully. I would still demand respect and partnership, because that is what saved us. My refusal to accept less than I deserved, even when I did not believe I deserved anything at all." 25 years into their marriage, Adrian fell ill, a fever that would not break, progressive weakness that confined him to bed. The physicians tried everything, but his body, already damaged by war injuries, could not fight the infection. Margaret sat beside his bed day and night, refusing to leave. Their children, now adults with families of their own, gathered at Ravencross Manor to say goodbye. "I am not ready to lose you," Margaret told Adrian one evening when they were alone. "We were supposed to have more time. I was supposed to grow old with you." Adrian took her hand with what little strength he had left. "Margaret, listen to me. You gave me 25 years I never expected to have. When I returned from war, I was already dead inside. Just walking, breathing, existing. You brought me back to life. You gave me love, family, purpose, joy. Every day with you has been a gift I did not deserve but will be eternally grateful for. Do not talk like that. You deserve everything. You became the man Thomas wanted you to be. You built the life he could not have. You honored his memory by living fully. Because you taught me how. Because you refused to let me hide in guilt and isolation. Margaret, you are the bravest person I have ever known. Braver than any soldier I served with. You had the courage to marry a man who could not love you and the patience to wait while he learned how. That is extraordinary. I love you. I have loved you for over 20 years. I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You will be fine. You are strong enough to carry our family forward. And Margaret, you must promise me something. Anything. Do not mourn me forever. Do not build a shrine to our marriage the way I built a shrine to my guilt over Thomas. Live, find joy, keep choosing happiness even after I am gone. That is how you honor what we built, by continuing to live fully. I promise. But Adrian, you did the same for me. You gave me everything I thought I would never have. Love, family, value, purpose. You saw worth in a woman her own family dismissed. You chose me when I had never been chosen. That changed my entire life." Adrian smiled weakly. "Then we saved each other. That is a good epitaph. They saved each other." He died that night, peacefully, surrounded by Margaret and their 5 children. His last words were, "Thank you for choosing me, Margaret, for refusing to let me waste my life. I love you, always." The funeral was enormous. The Duke of Ravencross was beloved by his tenants, his staff, his community. But the most moving tribute came from Thomas Ashford's widow, now an elderly woman who travelled to attend. "Your husband kept his promise to my Thomas," she told Margaret. "He supported my family for 27 years. But more than that, he lived the life Thomas wanted for him. He found love, built a family, experienced joy. That is what Thomas begged him to do with his last breath, to live fully enough for both of them. Your husband honored that request. Thank you for making it possible. After the funeral, Margaret's children gathered around her. Caroline spoke for all of them. Mama, how do you bear this? Losing the love of your life? Margaret considered her answer carefully. Your father and I started with nothing. No love, no affection, just mutual need and a practical arrangement. We built everything from that foundation, and because we built it intentionally, brick by brick, choice by choice, our love was strong enough to last. I carry that love forward now. It does not end because he died. It continues in you and your children, in everything we created together. I miss him terribly, but I'm not destroyed by his death. He gave me too much strength for that. He would want you to keep living, Edward said, to find joy again. He made me promise exactly that, and I will honor that promise. But not today. Today I grieve. Tomorrow I will start the work of living again. Margaret lived another 15 years. She managed Ravencross Manor with the same competence she had brought to the role decades earlier. She watched her grandchildren grow, saw some of them marry and have children of their own. She never remarried. Several men courted her. A wealthy widow duchess was an attractive prospect. But Margaret had no interest. She had experienced real love, real partnership. Anything else would be settling. On her 70th birthday, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, Margaret reflected on her life. I was told I would never be chosen, not like my sisters, that I was too plain, too bookish, too serious. I believed it. I resigned myself to being the family spinster, pitied and dismissed. Then the Duke of Ravencross asked for my hand, and everything changed. Tell us again how you met, her youngest granddaughter begged. The story of how grandfather chose you. Margaret smiled. I was hiding in a corner reading Marcus Aurelius. Your grandfather walked past every beautiful woman in that ballroom and came directly to me. He asked what I was reading, and when I told him, he smiled. Just barely, just for a moment. That was when I knew he saw me. Actually saw me. Not my plain appearance or my lack of accomplishments, but me, the person I was beneath all society's judgments. And you fell in love immediately? No. Love came much later. We built it day by day, choice by choice. Your grandfather taught me that real love is not instant or easy. It is intentional, it is work. It is choosing someone repeatedly, through difficulties and joys, through all the ordinary moments that make up a life. Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 72. Her children found her in her favorite chair in the library, a copy of Marcus Aurelius open in her lap, just as Adrian had first seen her all those decades ago. They buried her beside Adrian, their headstones side by side. Margaret's epitaph, chosen by her children, read, "She refused to be overlooked. She built love where others saw impossibility. She chose courage over resignation. Beloved wife, mother, and proof that being chosen is less important than choosing yourself first." The Ravencross family became legendary for their love story. Generations later, descendants would tell the tale of the plain daughter, who was never supposed to be chosen, and the broken duke who chose her anyway. How they had built love from a practical arrangement. How they had saved each other by refusing to accept limitations as permanent. And the lesson was always the same. Real love is not about being chosen by someone perfect. It is about choosing someone imperfect and building something extraordinary through patience, vulnerability, and daily effort. It is about refusing to settle for less than you deserve, even when everyone tells you to be grateful for scraps. Margaret had been told she would never be chosen, but she chose herself first, demanded respect and partnership, and built a love that lasted long after death. That was her legacy. Not that she married a duke, but that she refused to accept a loveless existence and fought for something more. She was chosen, yes, but more importantly, she chose, and that made all the difference.